Silent Hill 4 has a particular appeal. It doesn't exactly have that same droning, introspective quality of Silent Hill 2, or the almost cosmic horror of Silent Hill 1, with this dive down into ancient theological horrors. It certainly has some of that, but I wouldn't say that's its main appeal. It lives somewhere in the middle, but also in its own space altogether. Let's compare the introductions of each game. Silent Hill 1 starts with its theme played on a mandolin, which gives it this historical feel, which fits nicely with our very first exploration of Silent Hill's ancient cult. Silent Hill 2 begins with that surreal scene of Maria and James in the prison. We're placed somewhere completely out of context, mimicking James's repression, and then have the almost melodramatic theme of Laura play, showing that this time around the story won't be so focused on the ancient cult of Silent Hill, but on more interpersonal psychological phenomena. Silent Hill 3 starts with the cult component of the story, but turns almost into a late 90s music video. It's a little bit edgier, which is fitting since it is to some extent a coming-of-age story for Heather. And then we have Silent Hill 4. It's sporadically cut, confusing, disorganized. It sort of grabs the mundane, the ordinary, and corrupts it, which is a consistent theme in this game. It's as if beneath ordinary prosaic life, there's deep suffering, as the whole trailer is filled with these haunting grunts and moans. Now, unlike other games, this doesn't so much relate to the game's protagonist, Henry, as it does to Walter Sullivan, the mass murderer and main antagonist of this game. But these two are intrinsically connected in an interesting metaphysical way, as you'll see much later. So let's examine the story of Silent Hill 4 and its symbols. We wake up in this apartment building, and whoever we're playing as doesn't seem to recognize many things in his apartment. Looking over at this painting, we see the face of Henry Townsend, the game's protagonist, but the man we are controlling doesn't recognize him at all, implying that we are most likely playing as someone else here. I think this opening sequence is quite clever. Much of the game will take place inside Henry's apartment, so by placing us first in this otherworldly, corrupted version of the apartment, the game sort of subconsciously shapes how we perceive that space throughout the rest of the game. For most of the game, the apartment functions as a sort of safe house, where we'll save our progress, we'll manage our inventory, we'll admire the decor. But by showing us this corrupted version of it first, the game immediately undermines that sense of safety. It'll make us aware that the apartment's security is very fragile. It could fall apart at any moment. We just don't know when. On the coffee table, we see a children's book about a baby and a mother being connected by a magical cord. That would be an umbilical cord. But one day, the cord was cut, and the mother went to sleep. The baby was left all alone, and then made a lot of friends at the Wish House, the Silent Hill orphanage and pseudo-headquarters of the Silent Hill cult, known as the Order. We then see this ghost crawl out of the wall. We pass out and wake up as Henry in the normal apartment, or seemingly normal apartment, because when we try to interact with a telephone, it doesn't work. It then starts ringing.
Hello?
Help me.
What? The cord's cut.
Now, as cheesy as you might think this scene is, I personally think it's quite fun and campy in that kind of 2000s horror sense. It does set our expectations for the rest of the game, and that is to not expect any logical explanations for the events we are about to witness. The window to the apartment has been sealed shut. Looking out of our bedroom window, we focus on a Spanish woman who Spanishingly enters the subway station. As an aside, I really like just looking out into the street throughout the game. And not only does the game do some clever little story-based events outside, it also hammered in the themes of isolation, being able to look out into a world you cannot participate in. And of course we are unable to participate in it because when we look at our front door, we are locked inside. And more interestingly, we are locked from the inside. We'll speak more about the symbolic implications of that later. On the door we see, "Don't go out, Walter." At first I thought this was written by Walter, as if he signed it at the end. But now I believe it was most likely written by the previous tenant, Joseph, warning us about Walter Sullivan. Joseph will be an important side character as he was a journalist investigating the Walter Sullivan case. We hear something break outside and looking through the peephole, see our neighbor, Eileen Galvin.
Oh man. Hope my luck changes before the party.
On the wall are 15 bloody handprints, which Eileen doesn't seem to acknowledge. We see a small letter under the door. "Mom, why don't you wake up?" Clearly written by a child. Behind this bookshelf, we find a note which most likely refers to Walter, that he had performed the ritual of Holy Assumption, which allowed him to exist in a space separate from the world of our Lord. So Walter does not exist in the material world. This makes some sense. As we will find out later, Walter is in fact dead, but he exists in a sort of spiritual, metaphysical world of his own design. And these will be the worlds we will explore when we are not inside the apartment. Going into our bathroom, we see a giant hole.
What the hell?
Going through it, we enter into the first of Walter's metaphysical, dream-like worlds, or nightmarish worlds. We appear to be in South Ashfield's subway station, where we see that Spanish woman we saw through our bedroom window.
Who are you? What's your name?
Henry. And you?
This is my dream and you don't even know my name. It's Cynthia.
Cynthia tells us that she believes she is dreaming. She wants us to help her find the exit and flirtatiously tells us that she will do a special favor for us later.
It's just a dream, so I might as well have some fun.
While she's following us, she begins feeling ill and goes into the bathroom to puke. While waiting, we see the bathroom door opening. And a sickly dying dog flies out. Two other dogs come out and begin sucking the dead dog's blood with their incredibly long tongues. These are the first sort of basic enemy of the game, and they appear to make various animal sounds. I'll talk about what could be the significance of that later. The most noteworthy feature, however, is of course their tongues, which they use to suck the blood or life out of other dogs. This, I believe, is meant to represent a sort of umbilical cord. We've already seen in the Otherworld apartment that story about a baby, the baby being Walter, being connected to his mother by a magical cord, and the cutting off of that cord left the baby all alone. Looking at this through the lens of the psychoanalyst Carl Jung, we could see the umbilical cord as the most profound and deepest connection to the mother, to the womb, archetypally the purest form of safety. The importance of the umbilical cord in Walter's story, which you'll see is very important, could therefore show Walter's strong dependency and hyperfixation on the mother archetype, which makes sense since we see in the story that he was placed in an orphanage and so was left longing for the nurturing quality of the mother. But of course, just as the physical umbilical cord must be cut so that the child can become an independent living being in a material sense, so too must the psychological umbilical cord to the mother be cut. As Carl Jung tells us, the child is the being which matures towards independence, and it accomplishes this through voluntary separation from the mother archetype, the psychological symbol of familiarity and protection, and subsequent exploration of nature and/or the unknown. To a man like Walter, with a severe mother complex, the mother archetype may manifest itself in its negative form, For example, as Jung mentions, the terrible or devouring mother, all-consuming, leaving him searching for all-encompassing safety and nurture, always dependent and continually searching for the mother. And you'll see how this manifests itself much later. If you enjoy this kind of analysis, consider becoming a member for $1.99 to get a peek into the sick and twisted mind of Brian Griffin, and for $3.99, get your name at the end of each video. Before progressing by going into the women's bathroom, we go into the men's. We hear the sound of a piece of wood or something falling, but we don't see anything that has fallen or anything to pick up. Silent Hill 4 does this quite a lot, where it plays seemingly random sounds for no particular reason, and it gets pretty chaotic in later levels. I personally really love that about this game. It's like it has this courage to embrace the chaotic and just plainly absurd, which creates this feeling of uneasiness. Perhaps we could pair this well with the intro of the Otherworld apartments, you know, bringing the horror to the mundane, and never allowing you to feel any sense of safety. Perhaps we could say, the game cuts our umbilical cord and forces us into the chaotic and unknown. Also, you see how I can just fill these videos with just bullshit? A fucking plank fell down and I'm still yapping about it.
Let's just stop and analyse what's just happened there.
We go to the women's bathroom to check on Cynthia, but she's nowhere to be found. On the wall, we again see a giant hole. We crawl through it and end up back at the apartment. This is essentially the basic gameplay loop of this game. You head into one of Walter Sullivan's nightmarish worlds, and periodically head back to the apartment to save your progress, manage your inventory, and other things. Now, we've already seen how we can look out of the door's peephole, but this time we notice a piece of furniture has moved. Under it is a handgun and a message carved into the wall. The previous tenant, Joseph, tried to dig his way out of this room into Eileen's room, but to no avail. It's as if this room is in another dimension entirely, and there can't be any sort of interaction between those inside and those outside. Like, for example, when we try to call the phone number of this bar. Eileen didn't even notice the hole being dug, and we can now look into her room, where we'll see her periodically do mundane tasks like cleaning or watching television. Now, this marks a constant theme in this game, that is Henry as a sort of witness, as a voyeur to the rituals of Walter Sullivan. Most, if not all, the characters we meet will be given a sort of name. They'll embody a kind of archetype, and Henry is the receiver of wisdom, which I think conjures up some interesting theological ideas. In many religious rituals, the ritual must be witnessed in order to be valid, I suppose. Like a Christian baptism, for example, must be performed in front of a congregation. Others must be present to observe the spiritual transformation taking place. The witness sort of validates the ritual's sacredness, I guess. We then get a phone call.
Where did you go? Hurry! Save me!
It was Cynthia, so it appears that we can only interact with Walter's other world, and not the regular world. When we go back to the subway, we see a mannequin resembling Cynthia, with blood on her hands. The blood could perhaps symbolize Cynthia's impurity or corrupted nature as a sinner who will be sacrificed for Walter's ritual. That would make more sense much later, but I think it's more likely meant to symbolize specifically guilt. In a book called Another Crimson Tome, an extra piece of content released in Konami's website to give some backstory to Walter Sullivan and his victims, we see the only interaction Walter had with Cynthia. Here's a quick summary of it. 16 years ago, Cynthia Velasquez, who was a high school student at the time, was approached by a homeless man, Walter Sullivan, in the South Ashfield subway station. He awkwardly tries talking to her, pointing to apartment 302, the one we reside in, and claiming that he came from Silent Hill. He calls her by her name and said he had heard it 10 years earlier. Cynthia realized he might have been watching her for a long time, which of course frightened and disgusted her, and she quickly left with her friends. So Walter had been observing her, stalking her, and appears to have formed a sort of obsession with her. Like I mentioned before, Walter has developed a severe mother complex over being abandoned by his mother, developing into the devouring mother archetype within his unconscious, the all-consuming and castrating mother, which he will look to replicate throughout his life and look to appease her, let's say. This rejection, even though it was the most logical thing for Cynthia to do, I imagine wounded Walter very deeply, as, in his mind, it mimics the rejection by his biological mother. The mannequin with the bloody hand then becomes a symbol for this particular sin. At least that's how I imagine Walter would perceive it as. But moving on, we go down these stairs and see a new enemy. Now, these are kind of the most boring enemy in the game, at least lore-wise. They're simply the ghosts of Walter Sullivan's victims, and there's really not much more to analyze from there. They are very interesting, however, from a gameplay perspective. First of all, they cannot die. They are ghosts. They're already dead. There's only two ways to stop them, and that's by stabbing them with the Sword of Obedience, or using candles, both of which are limited items, meaning there's only so many Swords of Obedience and candles in one playthrough. This ties in well to the inventory management part of this game, and adds an extra layer of survival horror, specifically the survival aspect, forcing you to make the decision between trying to run past the ghosts, who drain your health the longer they stay close to you, or get rid of them and lose a pretty valuable item. Anyway, we keep progressing and finally meet back with Cynthia. After maneuvering through the labyrinth, we reach another hole that leads back to the apartment, but Cynthia once again disappears.
Are you yearning for that special place to spend quality time with your loved one? Do you need to relax and get away from it all? Come to Silent Hill for the ultimate peaceful getaway.
When we go back, we hear Cynthia on the intercom.
Henry, I found the exit. Come to the turnstile. Henry, I found the exit. Come to the turnstile. Hurry! Hurry!
But it seems like someone found her. We then have to go through literally the hardest part of the game. The escalators. Some within the community have speculated that this enemy is the sole reason why Japan still has the death penalty. These are the wallmen, and I believe they're worth examining a little closer. They emerge from the wall up to their torso, and they appear to be made out of the wall itself, almost, as if they haven't broken out of it. It's as if they are half-born, incomplete. So we could say, from a Jungian perspective, they are representative of Walter Sullivan's failed individuation, a physical representation of his mother complex, of his incompleteness, his desire to symbolically return to the womb, or maybe his inability to psychologically break out of the womb. We'll come back to this womb analogy later in the game. When we finally make it up the escalator, we find Cynthia's belongings scattered on the floor. On this door, we find a stone plate depicting a woman. On it is the word temptation. When we go inside, we find Cynthia.
Are you okay?
It's just a dream, right? I think I drank too much last night. I never got to do.
She was killed by Walter Sullivan. But why? Well, we still don't know Walter's grand plan. But we can extrapolate some reason, some meaning behind this murder. First, let's think about the temptation plate and how it relates to Cynthia. Cynthia is an attractive and flirtatious woman, so there's obviously a carnal temptation, but I believe the reason behind Walter killing her goes deeper than that. It would perhaps be helpful to think of Walter as an inverse Soren Kierkegaard, an evil Kierkegaard. Soren Kierkegaard was a Danish romantic Christian philosopher who believed that true faith required a kind of renunciation of worldly attachments, and to some extent an abandonment of reason. He famously breaks off his engagement to Regine Olsen because he believed marrying her, or marrying anyone for that matter, would bind him to the material world, and of course endanger his spiritual and religious path. We could see Walter's killing of Cynthia as a sort of twisted, corrupted version of this. Cynthia, who is attractive and lively and flirtatious, leaves a longing for the material world, for material pleasures. And as we already know, Walter performed the ritual of Holy Assumption, which, as was told to us in that note, allowed him to exist in a space separate from the world of our Lord, away from all these base desires. We wake up back in the apartment and hear sirens outside. When we look out the window, we notice an ambulance and a police car next to the entrance of the subway station. It appears that if you die in Walter's worlds, you die in this world as well. When we go into the living room, we hear two police officers talking about the numbers carved into Cynthia's chest. 16-1-21.
She's got numbers carved into her chest. I wonder if...
Looking over at Eileen's room, she also goes and checks what's going on outside. Looking through the peephole, we see another bloody hand has been added to the wall. And when we go to the bathroom, we notice the hole has gotten bigger, and we go in to start the next world, the Silent Hill Forest. It's here in the forest that we are introduced to the next enemy of the game, the hummers. These are small little critters with bat wings and the beak of a hummingbird. They're fairly harmless by themselves, but extremely dangerous in a group. This, I believe, could represent feelings of disgust within Walter surrounding the material world. If we look at this through a Freudian lens this time, Freud, who at one point was a sort of mentor to Carl Jung before they diverged in their practice, argues that civilization requires humans to suppress instinctual impulses, particularly sexual instincts. But we could, in the case of Walter, broaden this to just broadly carnal bodily appetites, and that disgust becomes one of the psychological mechanisms used to enforce said repression, pushing these desires away from our consciousness, or attempting to at least, as they will still of course reside in our unconscious. Before we talked about how Walter kills Cynthia, psychologically eliminates her, due to his perception of Cynthia as embodying those carnal bodily appetites. She is temptation, tempting Walter into this world, making him stray from his spiritual path. Perhaps we could see hummers as the manifestation of that repression, or more specifically of that disgust, as these annoying pests that must be swatted away and killed. Up ahead we see a parked car. There's a note left by Jasper Jean. Jane? Again? I don't know. He appears to be a young man coming to Silent Hill for some kind of exciting sort of adventure, I guess, hoping to meet the devil. In the next area, we meet him.
So you came to investigate this stone too?
He suffers from a slight stutter and tells us that this large stone was used by the natives to contact dead ancestors, and the Silent Hill cult started using it, calling it the Mother Stone. Moving on, we reach Wish House, the Silent Hill orphanage where Walter stayed during his childhood, and the sort of main base for the Silent Hill cult. We move on to this area overlooking Toluca Lake, and go through this hole to go back to our apartment. We hear the doorbell ringing, and look through the peephole.
Help me! Help! Let me out of here!
There's something going on in this room.
What do you mean?
I heard weird noises coming from inside there.
Help!
Hey, Richard, can you see anything from your window?
No. Everything looks pretty normal to me.
It's interesting how Eileen actually heard something coming from Henry's apartment. It's as if she is beginning to be more connected to Walter's other world, since it's kind of implied that that's where Henry's apartment is in. Anyway, we go through this door and see a child.
Hey, little boy, what are you doing here?
You're finally the third revelation. Something's gonna happen.
Jasper shows up and seems very excited about seeing this kid. Here we find an empty coffin with numbers, similar to the numbers we saw on Cynthia's chest. We then go back to the Wish House and give Jasper some chocolate milk from our fridge, and he gives us a spade. It's a good deal, I suppose. We use it in the forest to dig up a key. On it, it reads, the holder of this key will wander for eternity. When we try to go back to the orphanage, we get stuck in an infinite loop, so we have to use the hole to go back to our apartment, place the key in the chest, go back to the orphanage, use the hole there to retrieve the key, and finally get into the orphanage. All of these transitions have a loading screen, and you're somehow supposed to do this without throwing your controller at the wall or shoving it up your ass. I do like this gameplay loop of going back to the apartment though. It's always fun to check on your neighbors. We finally go into the orphanage and find a note left by the cult. It appears to be a sort of guide for a ritual. It's heavily damaged, however, so it starts at the second step, or second sign. By offering the blood of 10 sinners and white oils, whatever that is, one could be released from the bonds of flesh and gain the power of heaven, which is likely what Walter did, since he exists unbound by the flesh. He's non-corporeal, and gained the powers to create these worlds. In the third sign, the 4 atonements, we appear to be witnessing now. We've witnessed temptation. Now is time for Source. We get the next placard, Source. This time, a baby is depicted. We see Jasper burning, claiming that he has finally met the devil. The devil, of course, being Walter. In another Crimson Tome, we find the only interaction Jasper ever had with him. 10 years ago, Jasper and his friends Bobby and Sean encountered a strange man, Walter, who invited them to meet the devil. Jasper was scared and hid while Bobby and Sean went with the man. Afterwards, Jasper hears his friends scream for help. The man comes over to Jasper and says, "Hey, still hiding here? Come on up, buddy. You came to see me, Jasper." And Jasper runs away. When he finally stopped running, the man was gone. After this incident, Bobby and Sean mysteriously disappeared. This, I believe, reveals more about Jasper's sort of psychology than anything else. Losing his friends traumatically due to the cult, due to Walter, seems to have left Jasper with a sort of void of meaning, and he feels that void psychologically with the desire to see whatever ritual Walter is performing come to fruition. But I don't believe Jasper's death was the true point of this. I believe it's the burning of the orphanage. We see later that the whole building burns down after this. In the note describing the ritual, we find the phrase, "return to the source through sin's temptation." Temptation being, of course, represented by Cynthia. Her murder, as we talked about earlier, can be interpreted as Walter's rejection of worldly and bodily desire. In the next step, Source, leads us to Wish House, the orphanage where Walter spent most of his childhood. The burning of the orphanage could then be interpreted as a continuation of this rejection. It's Walter burning away his own origin, his spiritual source, the source of the cult's teachings, and most importantly, his identity that tied him to this world.
A special news report. In a forest near Silent Hill, the burned corpse of a 30-year-old male was discovered earlier today. The police have ruled it a homicide and are investigating. The numbers 17121 were reportedly carved into the man's body. Due to the marks on the victim, the police are investigating possible links to the Walter Sullivan case 10 years ago.
We see the superintendent of the apartment complex, Frank Sunderland.
I know this is sudden, but here's some trivia for you, as you seem to have finished your class.
Frank Sunderland is James Sunderland's father from Silent Hill 2. Isn't that so flipping interesting? We try knocking on our own door, but as always, nobody can hear us. After trying the key, he appears to hear something.
I'm sure I heard something in there. Yeah. That sound. It's the same one as back then.
When he leaves, we see another bloody hand has been added to the wall. We again go through the hole in the bathroom to go into the next world, the water prison. Reading notes within the water prison, we see that this is a structure used by the cult in the orphanage to punish the children, and I suppose adults as well, that might have shirked their religious duties. Now, this is meant to be one of Walter's memories, as most of the worlds are, but I find it hard to believe that the cult would have such a building and no one knew about it. So I believe the layout and appearance of the water prison might be more so representative of the psychological structure that emerged from Walter's time under the cult, and from their harsh punishment. Looking at the building's design, we can see that it clearly resembles a panopticon, a circular prison with a central tower that serves as a sort of surveillance point, so that a guard can observe the prisoners through some opening or window, in this case a hole. And throughout our exploration of the water prison, we'll sometimes hear someone in the middle or see someone passing by that hole. The entire design of the structure is incredibly deliberate. A panopticon is designed specifically so that prisoners can never know when they are being watched, so that they begin to internalize this surveillance, and eventually will continually act as if they are being watched, even when they are not. I believe psychologically this would be symbolic for Walter's own upbringing within the Silent Hill cult. Raised in this extremely strict religious environment, it would be hammered into him that an all-seeing authority, God, I suppose, was constantly watching and, most importantly, constantly judging, and this of course would fuel greater religious fervor. Now, the part of this prison which makes me believe that this is more so representative of Walter's psychological structure than simply a memory is the water component to the prison. In order to turn on the lights, we have to activate the flow of water, which itself appears to generate power. Water flows up and down the complex infinitely. Now, this is quite interesting. From a Jungian perspective, water can be seen as a symbol of the unconscious, of the depths of the unconscious, the hidden, sometimes repressed material of our psyche. And we are, after all, venturing into these metaphysical worlds formed by Walter, formed by his memories, his desires, his fears, and so on. In having analyzed Walter, as much as we could at least, we could also see water as a Jungian symbol for the womb, a nurturing maternal space, a symbol of rebirth, of transformation, much like the spiritual and religious transformation of Walter, but also an incredibly dangerous space, possibly suffocating. Again, the archetype of the devouring mother, Walter being consumed by his new mother, so to say, by the cult. I think this could also be shown in the new enemy we find in this area, although they're not much of a threat. The slugs. I call him Slugbert. It's kinda cute. The slug could maybe serve as a symbolic primordial form, an underdeveloped life, although it could also be a leech, and so something which feeds on a host, something that is dependent on a host, so we could perhaps see it as an extension of the umbilical cord symbol. And finally, in Jungian dream interpretation, calm, still water is often interpreted as a symbol of clarity, psychological stillness, calmness, but turbulent water, waters in motion, like the one we see in the prison, which is continually in motion, often signify overwhelming emotional turmoil, a surrendering to unconscious forces, in this case, the psychological effects of the cult's indoctrination. In one of the prison cells, we find the man begging for his life.
Walter's gonna kill me! He's gonna kill me!
When going back to our apartment, we find a note under the door. It's from the previous tenant, Joseph. He was a journalist investigating the Walter Sullivan case, a mass murder from 7 years ago where 10 people were killed in 10 days. Each corpse was left with a number carved in their body. When looking at them in order of when they happened, the pattern becomes clear. The 1 in the middle is actually meant to be a slash or a divider. So it's meant to be read as 1 out of 21, 2 out of 21, and so on, which means Jasper was 17 out of 21. It also matches up with the number of hands on the wall of the apartment corridor. Returning to the water prison and ascending to the upper floors, we see a new enemy type, the toadstools. These fungus-esque growths can be interpreted as an extension of, again, the umbilical cord symbol. A fungus exists in a state of total dependence, feeding off its surroundings. But the fact that they are called toadstools, I believe, adds an extra layer here. A toadstool is typically a fungus that is specifically poisonous, so this could hint at deeper feelings within Walter relating to being rejected by his mother. We'll learn more about this later. Or we could even point to the almost poisonous symbiotic relationship between Walter and the Silent Hill cult. In the top floors we encounter, in my opinion, the most terrifying looking enemy in the Silent Hill series, the twin victim. 2 sleeping baby heads, supported by a pair of arms. When they spot you, they don't immediately attack, they simply point at you, until we get closer. Although they are visually striking, and by far the most iconic enemy of this game, they are, however, on a symbolic level, quite weak. They are confirmed to simply be monstrous representations of the 7th and 8th victims of Walter Sullivan, Billy and Miriam Locken, who were twins, but this design is begging for a deeper analysis. So here's my interpretation. First, we have the fact that, in Walter's world, they appear specifically as conjoined twins, which fits nicely, of course, with the umbilical cord symbol, this dependency on another, in Walter's case, his mother, and with his failure of individuation we talked about before, his failure to separate himself from the mother archetype, and becoming consumed by her. And then interestingly, we have the fact that Walter manifests them as babies, even though nothing hints at them being babies when Walter committed the murders. And they also appear to be asleep. Their eyes are closed. We could interpret these details in a similar way to the Wallman, as representations of incompleteness. They are still in an unconscious state, which would be indicative of Walter's failed individuation. But anyway, we eventually reach the inner part of this water prison, its sort of surveillance center, let's call it, and find that we are able to rotate its individual floors. By rotating one of them, we actually end up freeing that man stuck in one of the cells.
Making it make standing anymore. When we stay there, I can't make inside. Make inside.
We see him pleading with that kid we saw at the orphanage.
Walk away. Who is that boy? And who are you? His name's Walter. Walter Sullivan. I used to work at the orphanage watching the kids. I'm Andrew DeSalvo. They tried to make it seem like an orphanage, but according to that town's holy scriptures, it was actually the center of their religion.
So this child is Walter Sullivan. You'll see much later on that the manifestation of Kid Walter is pretty obviously a representation of his unresolved childhood self, his unmet needs and desires, particularly his desire to see his mother and become one with her.
That kid Walter, he was really into that mumbo-jumbo, especially that descent of the Holy Mother business. It was scary. Oh, God.
We could say that Walter's ritual is in many ways a way for him to fulfill these infantile desires. Moving on, we get a taser from this room, which is basically the most overpowered weapon in the game, since it kills basically everything in one hit. The only downside being that it takes a little longer to wind up the attack. In the bottom floor, we get the Watchfulness placard, represented by an eye. When we go in, we get a cutscene. We see Andrew DeSalvo, dead in the water, the 18th victim. As usual, another Crimson Tome gives us some backstory to Andrew DeSalvo. In Wish House, there just weren't enough watchmen to observe the children, so a few men, non-members of the religious organization, were hired to fill that role. One of them was Andrew DeSalvo. He was always drunk and abused the children. Because of that, he was nicknamed and called Fat Pig by the other watchmen and children. Andrew didn't care whether the children kept or broke the rules. He abused the children regardless. I believe Walter kills Andrew because, in some ways, he becomes a representative of that ever-present internalized surveillance Walter dealt with at the hands of the cult. Even if Andrew himself was not a member of the cult, he becomes a symbol for the psychological stranglehold the cult's teachings had on Walter. Now, let's think about how he is killed. Apart from the numbers carved into his stomach, he doesn't appear to have any other injuries, implying that he was most likely drowned. We've talked about how water can be seen as a symbol of the unconscious, but perhaps we could see it more specifically here as a symbol of repression. After all, in a system, a religious institution in this case, where one is always being watched, or if one simply believes he is constantly being watched, the natural response is always repression. Back in the apartment, we see that Frank, the superintendent, was trying to open the door, but as expected, was unable to.
But it looks like something's, blocking it from the inside. Anyway, It's not the first time.
You mean the guy who lived here before?
And it wasn't just him either. There's something wrong with his whole apartment.
Don't say that. You're scaring me.
Frank slipped a note under the door, but when we try to read it, it's full of blood. He then says something odd.
Don't worry about it too much. There are a lot of strange things in this world. The umbilical cord I keep in a box in my room. Lately it's started to smell terrible.
Huh? Umbilical cord?
Oh, well, I forget I said anything.
But still... those noises.
We hear the shower turn on, and when we go to check the bathroom, the bathtub is full of blood. The hole has gotten even bigger, and we hear what sounds like a woman crying. But we go in anyway to go to the next stage. The building world is essentially South Ashfield as a labyrinthic urban jungle. Buildings lead into alleyways, which lead into stairwells, which lead into businesses, which lead into... you get the point. Through notes, we find out that Walter used to sneak out of the orphanage to come to South Ashfield. So we could say that this is a representation of the city through the eyes of Walter as a kid. Confusing, oppressive, and shaped entirely by his anxieties at the time. Here we find the next enemy. The Gumheads. They are ape-like monsters who charge at you, but if you're fast enough, the taser makes pretty easy work of them. I don't believe it's a stretch to say that this could be a representation of Walter's views of humanity. Walter is on a spiritual journey, a path towards what he would no doubt see as something higher. And we've already talked about how he denies or eliminates bodily carnal pleasures, as we saw with the murder of Cynthia. But those desires, of course, don't just disappear. They accumulate in what Jung called the shadow, the Jungian shadow being the repressed aspects of one's psyche, all psychological phenomena we reject or deem unfit for our conscious self. Our more primitive, animalistic nature, our aggression, our desire to dominate others, all pushed into our unconscious, forming our shadow. Jung tells us we have a tendency to project our shadow onto others. As he says, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So we could see the Gumheads as Walter's projection of his shadow, of his denial of the material world. Humanity is reduced to primal urges. To him, others are unspiritual, base creatures. After all, Jung tells us, the shadow is the thing a person has no wish to be. We also have to acknowledge the possibility of the Gumheads being representative of Walter's views of men. By that I mean males, human males, as being primate-like, aggressive, violent, men as figures which he cannot control, most likely because men were likely the main perpetrators of Walter's physical abuse, for example. And I say this because there is a monster later in the game which I believe is representative of Walter's views of women. So this would pair quite nicely with that interpretation later on. We could also expand upon this and link this view of men as being deeply linked to Walter's view of his father, which we'll see much later on was likely quite an abrasive and aggressive sort of character. As we keep exploring, a man falls from a 4-story building and reacts appropriately.
Ouch! Damn it. Where the hell am I? You're a real person.
This is Richard Braintree, a man who lives across from us in the same apartment complex. We can actually look into his room from our window. He theorizes that if we are both here, then there must be something wrong with the entire apartment complex. And he mentions Joseph, the journalist that used to live in room 302 before us, and how he too locked himself in his apartment and wouldn't come out.
Anyway, I'm getting the hell out of here. You should too, if you know what's good for you.
Wait. Watch out for that kid.
If you've already played this game, you can probably already see the symbolic connection I'm forming here. between the primate-like enemies, the Gumheads, Richard, and Walter's father. But we'll expand on this more as we go. Anyway, when we get back to the apartment, we'll look through the peephole. And see, better check on your neighbor soon. Now, is this about Richard Braintree, or is it about Eileen? When we go back to the building world and reach this elevator, we see Richard, this time with young Walter.
Are you the kid he was talking about? You live in that apartment too, huh? Say, you look a lot like a little punk that I once caught sneaking around there. Do you know something about what's going on? Hey, you! Stop!
We eventually reach a bar, and this is actually the same bar from that advertisement we can see from our window. Looking at this note, we see that the code for this door is the last 4 digits of the bar's phone number. So we have to go back to the apartment, look at the last 4 digits, and input the code. We go up this long stairwell and reach a door with the number 207, Richard Braintree's room number. On it we find yet another placard, Chaos, with some abstract lines and shapes. When we go in, we find Richard Braintree being electrocuted. 19 out of 21 written on his forehead. Next to him is young Walter pointing out the window. Richard manages to tell us that's no kid. That's the 1121 man. When we go back to the apartment and look through the window, we see adult Walter Sullivan pointing at Eileen's room. Now let's examine why Richard was the next victim. In another Crimson Tome, we find one of the interactions Walter had with him. A man named Mike, who was known to be stalking a woman named Rachel in the apartment building, bumps into Richard, and Richard, tired of Mike's behavior, drags him into his apartment and proceeds to beat him, ripping off his bloody clothes to humiliate him. Young Walter, who would often leave the orphanage to come to these apartments, saw this. Richard notices little Walter staring and says, You snooping around again? Get your ass out of here before you really piss me off." Richard is Chaos. To Walter, he represents the aggressive, authoritarian male figure he's had to contend with his entire life. Richard is, in a sense, a more actualized version of the male primates, the Gumheads. He is erratic, confrontational, and he's sort of deeply unspiritual and reactive. He seems very much like a man that acts on impulse. His revolver can be seen as sort of a symbol of male potency, an assertion of dominance. To Walter, this is what a man is at his core. Primitive, and perhaps most importantly, he is an obstacle to him. Just like how Gumheads will stand still in front of doors to stop us from progressing, Richard keeps Walter from the apartments, more specifically from room 302, which you'll see becomes an important symbol in of itself. And finally, I should mention Richard and the Gumhead's direct relation to Walter's father, who also blocks and takes away agency, takes away potency from Walter. But we'll have to talk about that much later.
Looks like another one, Captain. Got 121 on his head. It's just like that case from 10 years ago. Yeah, that Walter Sullivan case. But Sullivan's dead. They even got the body. Must be some crazy copycat. Yeah, but even so...
When we peek into Eileen's room, we see her getting dressed and doing her nails, getting ready for the party she was going to. But now's not the time to be looking at coups. We got a hole to crawl through. The next world is, well, our apartment complex. We first see Walter Sullivan knocking on the door of room 301, Eileen's room. When he leaves, we see young Walter at the door of room 302, our room, screaming for his mom. Outside in the stairwell, we see Walter. He says he got this doll from Eileen a long time ago.
She was younger than me back then. She looked so happy, holding her mother's hand.
When we go to the superintendent's room, we find a red box that Henry says stinks so bad it brings tears to his eyes. We find the superintendent's diary on his night table, and it reads, "The red box seems even stranger today. It's giving off a terrible smell. It's disgusting, but I just can't throw it away." It must have been around 30 years ago. That young couple was living in the apartment, but one day they just suddenly disappeared, ran off just like thieves in the night. I don't know why. It must have been money troubles, or maybe they got themselves into some kind of danger. The problem came after that. They left their newborn baby when they took off. I even found the umbilical cord. I called the ambulance right away, and I heard the baby survived. But I don't know what happened to him. Although a few years later, I often saw a young kid hanging around the apartment. One day he just stopped coming by. But now that I think of it, I'll bet he was that abandoned baby. It's a horrible story, abandoning a newborn baby. That all happened in room 302. And the umbilical cord I found there, well, I still can't get myself to throw it away. So Walter was abandoned by his parents in room 302. The fact that the umbilical cord was left there as well could point to the parents performing a water birth at home, which might be the symbolic significance of the bloody bathtub we see in our apartment. Young Walter then appeared to be pulled, for lack of a better term, to this apartment complex, specifically to room 302, continually searching for his mother. We could then say the apartment itself becomes the symbol of the womb Walter psychologically desires to return to. This also explains why we see the room locked from the inside. Just as we are stuck inside, Walter is, in a sense, stuck outside. Even in this metaphysical world of his own making, he is unable to psychologically reach the mother. He is unable to individuate. He is always the little boy left wanting for the safety and security of his mother's womb. Going into Richard's room, we see, just like in the regular world, Walter, looking up at Eileen's room. She is obviously the next step in Walter's ritual, but we are yet to find out why or how. When we go back to the apartment, we see two important notes written by Joseph. From his notes, we discover that Walter had committed 10 gruesome murders, all with their respective numbers, 1 out of 21, 2 out of 22, all the way until 10 out of 21. He was then caught and eventually committed suicide in his prison cell. But 4 years later, the police discover a body marked with 12 out of 21. They simply believed it was some copycat killer, but we know that Walter is behind these murders, and we can assume that Walter himself was 11 out of 21. A necessary step in his ritual in order to ascend beyond the material world and create his own. We eventually find the key to Eileen's room, and we go check on her.
Thanks. Did you find your mommy? This place? It's dangerous. You need to hurry. Get out of here.
We wake up in our room to the sounds of sirens. We hear some police or paramedics talking in Eileen's room.
So they took the victim to St. Jerome's, huh?
Yeah, she's not gonna make it. She had numbers in her back, too.
When we look through the hallway, we see the 20th hand has been added to the wall, although this one is very faint. In the laundry room, we find the washing machine exploded blood. Anyway, we see a mark or stain on the wall that Henry says looks like an evil demon. We then have to use this succubus card on it. I was really struggling to figure out the significance of this succubus card. I couldn't find anyone talking about it online. So I thought we could have a little Freudian reading of this, which I think actually pairs quite well with the Jungian reading of Walter's mother complex. In particular, the formation of the devouring mother archetype within his psyche. Freud's Oedipus complex theory tells us that during a boy's psychosexual development, he forms a particular attachment to his mother. He desires her exclusive affection and desires to please her, and in turn, he develops a sort of hostility towards the father, who becomes in some sense his rival. And with this comes a desire to eliminate him, as we saw with a man like Richard Braintree, who, like we talked about, is representative of this obstructive male figure, keeping Walter from the apartment, from his mother. Now, in a healthy psychosexual development, this conflict would be resolved. The child largely abandons that exclusive attachment to the mother, although she will likely be a model for future sexual partners, and makes some sort of amends with the father, and identifies with him. But Walter was abandoned by his mother, so he hyperfixates on the mother figure, never being able to reach her, never being able to please her. And so that maternal figure symbolically returns as a sort of succubus, as an all-consuming, devouring female figure. When we use the succubus card on the stain, various indents and some text appears that reads, "After he did the ritual of Holy Assumption, other worlds began to force their way into his universe, and it began to swell horribly. But his universe is different from ours. It has limits, and in the limits of that universe he rules as king, and in the deepest parts of his kingdom is his mother." We place all of the different placards we've been collecting into the indents, and when we do, a new hole appears, which will lead us into the next world. We wake up in a hospital and see Walter digging through the corpse of a woman. When we go back into that room, we're introduced to the next enemy of this game. The patients. These are incredibly tall women who serve to absolutely heightmog Henry to death. And I think their height is an important detail when examining this enemy, seeing as it's a large female figure who would symbolically occupy a lot of space in Walter's psyche, his mother. We could say they represent latent feelings of hatred towards his mother who abandoned him. But just like we analyze the gumheads as representative of Walter's views of men, generally, we could see the patients more broadly as his views of women. One of the most striking details of the patients is their double face, that appear to be cobbled together. This we could view, again through a Freudian lens, as a manifestation of what Freud called the Madonna whore complex. The Madonna whore complex being, very basically, a psychological complex where a man sees women in their extremes, either as whores, purely sexual beings which men can extract pleasure from. We can point to Cynthia, which Walter labels as temptation, or as Madonnas, the Virgin Mary, saint-like, the pinnacle of feminine virtue, nurturing and totally asexual. Here we can point to Eileen, but we'll get to that later. As Freud says, where such men love, they have no desire, and where they desire, they cannot love. So the patients could be a physical manifestation of this sort of psychic division, kind of crudely fused together, where Walter struggles to form a fully individual and actualized feminine figure. While exploring, we find Eileen's handbag on the floor. In this room, we find a bunch of pictures and x-rays of Eileen. It's safe to assume then that we are in the hospital Eileen was taken to, and that she might still be alive. We then reach this hallway filled with these autonomous wheelchairs that run you over if you don't dodge them. This hallway has a great many rooms, and you have to check literally all of them. So let's just take a look at the ones I found to be the most symbolically potent. Let's start off with arguably the most iconic of these rooms. We see a giant head resembling Eileen staring at us, and in the background hear what sounds like moans of pleasure. This, I believe, is again a manifestation of Walter's Oedipital fixation. Eileen, who you'll see serves as a sort of substitute mother, enlarged, symbolizing Walter's idealization and Madonna-esque elevation of the mother archetype. and of Eileen specifically. And then we have the moaning. Again, the subconscious desire to reach the mother, to obtain her affection, and to please her. In the second room, we find a dying flower, completely dried out. The flower, as a symbol within the collective unconscious, to use Jungian terms, can be broadly seen as a symbol of femininity, of feminine virtue, or of purity. Again, the idealized mother, the Madonna. It being dead and dry here might be showing the futility of this never-ending chase of the mother, of the idealized Madonna, who has become, in Jungian terms, a devouring mother. Jung tells us, the real therapy only begins when the patient sees that it is no longer father and mother who are standing in his way, but himself. Whatever neurosis or complex caused by Walter's mother abandoning him will not be resolved by perpetually chasing her, or the idea of her, to somehow make that wrong right. That neurosis is already, to some extent, a part of him. It must be confronted with himself only. In this third room we see incubators with umbilical cords coming out of them, or coming into them, which I think helps show this process of chasing the mother, attempting to return to the womb, as something artificial, mechanical. And finally we have the room with the hanging body, and surrounded by those dead flowers, which I believe is meant to be a sort of reenactment, or meant to be symbolic of Walter's suicide in his prison cell. He did not hang himself, but that's neither here nor there. But eventually we reach Eileen's room. She starts screaming, probably still believing she's in her room with Walter, but eventually calms down.
Henry? From next door. What are you doing here?
I don't know where to start. There was this strange hole in my room. I saw people getting killed. All these weird other worlds. And I saw you get attacked too.
What are you talking about? I'm supposed to believe that?
But it's true. And there was a kid with you.
I remember now. I was getting ready to go to my friend's party. The boy protected me from the man with the coat. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I guess there's something wrong with me. I just feel so scared.
Henry tells her that if you die here, you die in the regular world as well. He tells her about the hole being the only way he knows how to get out. And so Eileen asks Henry to take her with him. And we begin essentially the second part of the game, which consists of escorting Eileen through every single level we've been through, backtracking through the whole game, while also protecting her, because there's no way to permanently heal her. And if she loses enough health, the final boss of this game becomes almost impossible, or at least it becomes impossible to get the good ending. Also, Walter will show up with a gun and a chainsaw for some reason. And basically what I'm trying to say is that I hate my fucking chud life, but I'm in love with this Void, so I still do it.
I'm a motherfucking Gunagoy. I'm a dreamer goy. I love a Void that don't even fucking need a goy.
We reach the hole we came in from and take Eileen with us. But when we wake up in our apartment, she's nowhere to be found. As we head into the living room, we hear something. Henry says the air in this room feels heavy. The ceiling fan has fallen. It's over. This room, it's so oppressive. From this point on, we get one of my favorite mechanics in this game, the hauntings. As you periodically head back to the apartment, different paranormal events will occur, and you must either use the saint medallions or the candles to make them disappear. These can range from windows shaking to ghosts coming out of the walls, much like we saw in the intro section of the game. One particularly interesting haunting is the fridge cat. A bloody and mangled corpse of a cat will show up inside the fridge, and it strangely reminds me of Kojima's PT baby in the sink. I wonder if he was inspired by this haunting, since I've heard he took particular interest in Silent Hill 4. But let's not reminisce about PT. After all, remember when is the lowest form of conversation. We get another letter from the journalist Joseph, along with the key. He tells us to keep going down, to the deepest part of Walter Sullivan and look for the ultimate truth. Going back through the hole, we meet again with Eileen.
Oh, Henry.
Have you been here the whole time?
Yeah? And I didn't see any hole either. You just disappeared all of a sudden. I can't stay here by myself. I'll be cursed. I know it. What am I gonna do?
I might know a way to save you. Do you know about someone named Joseph?
Henry asks Eileen about Joseph, the previous tenant from our apartment. She says the same thing as Richard, that he got real strange towards the end and isolated himself. Henry tells her about his investigation into the Walter Sullivan case, and about the letter we just got telling us to head down into the deepest part of Walter.
Okay. I'll do it. You're the only chance I've got. I'll stick with you.
After witnessing the peak of subtle psychological horror, we reach this door with a message next to it that simply says, "Ever downwards." Beyond this door, we see a long spiral staircase going down, which will from now on serve as the sort of transition between levels. This I think we can read through a Jungian lens as a descent into Walter's unconscious, where we'll find this ultimate truth. So therefore it's more of a metaphysical, a psychic truth, as opposed to just a material truth, I suppose. We're now back in the subway level, which is now filled with gumheads. But the biggest change, by far, comes when you head to the place where Cynthia was killed. Since the regular ghosts are meant to be literally Walter's victims, it makes sense that these new victims would also turn into these ghosts. Cynthia is definitely one of the creepiest of the new ghosts we'll encounter, especially the sounds she makes. It's like a mix of crying and gasping for air. This difficulty breathing, of course, comes from the fact that she was stabbed by Walter multiple times. While revisiting these levels, we come across this large worm called the Greedy Worm. Both its design and its name, I believe, evoke the idea of an umbilical cord. Something that feeds and sustains itself thanks to some form of host. But greedy suggests, an excess, like it's taking too much, which could point to Walter's complete dependency on this idea of his mother. I think it's also worth comparing the Greedy Worm, which snakes itself across these levels, and the hole and tunnels we've been going through this whole time. At one point, when we go back to the apartment, we get an interesting diary entry written by Joseph. He says a few days after Walter killed himself in his prison cell, Richard and the superintendent had seen a man in a trench coat hanging around room 302, and the superintendent believes the man actually got in at some point. Now, we already know that Walter did not die, not in a conventional sense at least, in his prison cell. But as far as I know, this is the first time it is implied that Walter ever got into room 302. So the question is, what did he do in here exactly? And seeing as he's not technically dead, could he be in here with us right now? But moving on, after redoing literally the hardest part of the game, we move this train car a few inches and go through this door to get to the next level. We quickly leave before Walter starts shooting at us. From now on, Walter will follow us through the different levels, and as he gets closer to Eileen, or damages her in any way, she'll start getting more and more cursed, and as she gets more cursed, she will begin talking like a child, mimicking young Walter, or embodying the emotions felt by young Walter.
Mommy? Wake up! Let me in! I'm scared!
Now, in the forest world again, we head to the remains of the burnt orphanage. The fire having started, if you recall, from Walter burning Jasper alive. Our objective in this level is to find all the limbs of this charred doll, so that it moves and allows us to pass. The message carved into it reads, "Though my body may be destroyed, I will not let you pass here. To prepare for the receiver of wisdom, I cut my body into 5 pieces and hid them in the darkness. When my body is once again whole, the path to below will be opened. If you are the receiver of wisdom, you will understand my words. The ritual has begun." Now, the receiver of wisdom is the name Walter assigns to us in his ritual to see his mother, which I suppose would in fact be the god of the Silent Hill cult. So even this feels as though it is all planned out by Walter, as if we are following his carefully laid out plan that will lead us to our own death, and make us the last victims of his ritual. Before heading down, however, in the cemetery, we see young Walter.
Are you Walter Sullivan?
That's what everybody calls me, but I don't really have a name or a home either.
Well, what about a mom or dad?
Yeah, but I never met them. They left South Ashfield Heights right after I was born. But soon I'll get to see my mom.
Do you know where she is now?
Yeah, of course. Right where I was born. Lots of people tried to stop me, but it's fine now. It says in the scriptures that I'll be with her. I gotta hurry. Mom's waiting.
There's something very upsetting about seeing young Walter, whose ultimate desire was so innocent, that being seeing his mom, turn into the chaotic, hellish, and violent reality we see now. In our apartment, we get yet another piece of Joseph's diary, or memos, whatever you want to call them. He theorizes that Walter never actually died in prison. Whether it was someone else that committed suicide or the police simply got the wrong guy, he doesn't know and admits he'll likely never know. But he is certain that Walter did something in room 302, and that he is likely nearby. Going into this area of the forest, we find Jasper. But he's really not much of a threat. He's basically limited to this one little area, not like Cynthia, who is in my opinion the most relentless of the sort of main ghosts. But anyway, going down into the basement of the orphanage, we find the full process for the ritual Walter is performing, the descent of the Holy Mother. The first sign, and God said, "At the time of fullness, cleanse the world with my rage. Gather forth the white oil, the black cup, and the blood of the 10 sinners. Prepare the ritual of the Holy Assumption." The second sign, and God said, "Offer the blood of the 10 sinners and the white oil. Be then released from the bonds of the flesh, and gain the power of heaven. From darkness and void, bring forth gloom, and gird thyself with despair, for the giver of wisdom." This is the process Walter went through in order to create his metaphysical worlds, where he, as the text says, was released from the bonds of the flesh, and gained the power of heaven. The third sign, and God said, "Return to the source through sin's temptation. Under the watchful eye of the demon, wander alone in the formless chaos. Only then will the 4 atonements be in alignment." This being the 4 murders of Cynthia, Jasper, Andrew, and Richard. And God said, "Separate from the flesh too, she who is the mother reborn, and he who is the receiver of wisdom. If this be done, by the mystery of the 21 sacraments, the mother shall be reborn, and the nation of sin shall be redeemed. As I've said, Henry is the receiver of wisdom, the sort of witness to the sacred ritual, and Eileen will serve as Walter's mother manifested. And of course, her sacrifice will serve to bring back the god or goddess of the Silent Hill cult. So I guess now is the perfect time to talk about why Walter chooses Eileen to be his mother reborn, as I believe Walter would interpret the teachings of the cult on a deeply personal level like this. In another Crimson Tome, we get the only interaction they ever had. Basically, 18 years ago, Eileen, who was still a small child walking with her mother, encounters a homeless man, Walter, in the South Ashfield subway station. Her mother warns him to not even look at him, but she doesn't listen to her and asks Walter, "Why are you sleeping here? Aren't you cold?" Her mother again tells her not to talk to him, but she says, "Mommy, he's cold here. Can't you see that?" She gives him her doll and tells him, "You can sleep with her." It then reads, and I quote, "The young man looked at the child's and mother's back, holding the dolls she gave him. They looked very happy. This made him cry, and he could not stop the tears from running." Eileen, as far as we know, is the only person who ever showed Walter any genuine kindness. For someone with such a crippling mother complex, someone so hurt, and complexes almost always arise from some sort of psychic injury, Walter, in Freudian terms, fixates on young Eileen and projects all the qualities of the mother archetype onto her, since she was the only person to provide any kind of affection that would be expected of a mother. Now, when going down these spiral staircases, we see various Silent Hill otherworldly imagery on the sides. These could be your average rusty, bloody, otherworld imagery, or symbols which reference things we've already talked about in Walter's story. A very interesting symbol we see here, however, is a white sheep, or a white lamb, standing in front of a cross. This feels quite unique, and I believe it's worth thinking about more deeply. The sheep, the white lamb, is an obvious symbol of sacrifice in Christian iconography. In that sense, we could say that it's representative of Walter himself, having sacrificed himself for his higher purpose, and for his submission to something greater than himself, to the mother, to the Madonna, to the cult. But the sheep is also an animal that must be led. It's, for lack of a better term, quite a passive animal. And so in that sense, I believe it's more likely meant to represent Walter's victims, including of course Henry and Eileen, as we are being led to our own demise, unknowingly sacrificing ourselves for Walter's grand plan, for Walter's desires. We again arrive at the water prison world, truly a wonderful place.
It's so damp and gross here.
This level doesn't really have much to talk about the second time around. We do a pretty cool puzzle, try to stay away from Walter, and take care of Andrew's ghost with a sword of obedience, until we get to the end of the level. There's this strange optical illusion at the end here that's really neat. I'm not sure why it was put here. I don't believe any other Silent Hill games have done anything quite like this, but very cool either way. In the building world, we are instantly introduced to the main ghost of this area, Richard Braintree, who appears to sort of erratically glitch around, most likely symbolic of his cause of death, being electrocuted. The entire goal of this level is to place 4 objects in their rightful spot, placing candles on a cake, a billiard ball on a pool table, a volleyball in a basket, and a stuffed cat in a cage at the pet store. This is all meant to represent things which Eric Walsh, the 10th victim of Walter's, cherished in his life. In the days where he says the door of time was wide open, the door of time being in this case a literal door, which is now upside down, likely representing his perpetual existence as this otherworldly ghost, where time no longer flows forward in a conventional linear manner, I suppose. Time is sort of suspended for him, and the other victims of course. But let's go back to the stuffed cat and the pet store. When we reach Steve Garland's pet store, we hear this cacophony of different animals. When we leave, we find a newspaper on the ground. It reads, according to the Ashfield police, on ... At approximately 3:30 in the evening, witnesses hear the pet shop Garland's reported the sound of multiple gunshots, possibly from an automatic weapon. By the time the police arrived, the perpetrator had already fled, and the shop owner, Steve Garland, was found dead with a probable submachine gunshot wound to the head. All of the store animals were brutally slaughtered and the store left in complete disarray. In addition, inside sources say that Garland's heart had been removed, and on his back, 5 numbers were carved. When we go back in, the store is riddled with bullet holes, blood everywhere. Now, my theory is this. Could it be that the dog enemies we encountered throughout the game not only emerged from Walter's psyche as a result of the shooting of the pet store, but that even their strange, arguably misplaced sounds come from his memory of the cacophony of animal sounds that blended together? What do you think? Am I a fucking idiot? Feel free to tell me in the comments.
I'm going to see my mom. Stay out of my way. Who are you, anyway?
My name's Walter. Walter Sullivan. It's time to complete the 21 sacraments.
But that's my name. And what are the 21 sacraments?
Don't worry. You'll know soon enough. Well, let's go and see Mother.
Let me go, that hurts!
After putting all the objects in their correct location, we again reach the South Ashfield bar, except this time the code for the door is different because they changed their business number, so we have to call them to hear the new number and input the last 4 digits into the keypad. We reach this door and get a cutscene. Here we get the first boss of the game, right? Yeah, there's not a lot of bosses in this game. This is the One Truth. You have to find the One Truth among his decoys. You'll know you have the right one once you hit him and all the enemies begin taking damage. Although it's a bit anticlimactic, I guess, from a gameplay perspective, visually it's really amazing. I absolutely love this large, almost theatrical stage and giant pit in the center. Now, the One Truth and his decoys visually resemble the Wallman, and so we can apply the same interpretation to that aspect of this boss. But it's worth it to think about the mechanics of this boss a little more deeply. The name, The One Truth, mirrors Henry's current goal of delving deeper into Walter's psyche to discover the ultimate truth, as Joseph called it. And in order to do so, Henry must discriminate between objective reality, the material reality, and a spiritual, deeper reality, found deep within Walter's psyche, within the metaphysical worlds he's created. But that would imply that this is almost a test of sorts. Well, I believe that we are in a sense being tested. Again, it's as if we're being led through Walter's other worlds so that Eileen can serve as the Mother Reborn, and Henry as the so-called receiver of wisdom. This witness to the ritual, almost as if it were all just a large stage, which could be the explanation for the environment where we find this boss. And so, we finally reach the bottom of the staircase, where we see the door to room 302.
This must be what hell is like.
On the floor we find a diary entry from the superintendent. I had a weird dream today. The one with the man with the long hair and coat. He was crying and looking for his mother again. I saw that man with the coat 10 years ago at this apartment. He was going up the stairs, carrying a heavy tool, an old-looking bowl, and a bag that was dripping blood. I never saw him again after that, but a few days later, the neighbors complained that they heard strange noises coming from the supposedly empty room 302. So I took a look around room 302 and found signs that someone had been in there, but nothing odd other than that. And that's when it all started. I still hear strange noises coming from the window of room 302. We go into the apartment, and it's completely monochrome and eerily still. Almost lifeless. On the coffee table, we find the full version of that children's book about a baby and a mother being connected by a magical cord, the umbilical cord. It continues by saying that the baby eventually went to live at the orphanage, Wish House, and that his friends there told him how to wake up his mom. But no matter how much he tried, she wouldn't wake up, because the one he was trying to wake up was actually the devil. The baby had been deceived. Poor baby. The devil here being the god or goddess of the Silent Hill cult. In this book, the Crimson Tome, not to be confused with the other Crimson Tome we've been reading from, we see what we must do to avoid it. We must bury part of the conjurer's mother's flesh within the conjurer's true body, so the umbilical cord in the superintendent's room in the true body of Walter Sullivan. We are then visited by the man who used to live in our apartment, the journalist, Joseph.
It's him.
You've done well to make it this far. Let me tell you something about him, Walter Sullivan. When he was a little boy, he began to believe that my apartment was actually his birth mother.
He gives us Walter's backstory and how he ended up creating these worlds. But he then says,
His boyhood desire to return to the bosom of his birth has divided him. Now his child self has manifested itself in this world. And soon he's planning to finish his work, the 21 Sacraments. Number 20, the Mother Reborn, Eileen Galvin. Number 21, the Receiver of Wisdom, Henry Townsend. Even now, it may not be too late. Follow the Crimson Tome. Stop him. If not, wherever you run, he will catch you. Find him. His true location. It must be nearby. You must kill him. You must kill him. Kill. 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 Hurry. She's taken over. She's number 20. The mother was born. The Crimson Tome. Obey the Crimson Tome. Kill him. Must kill him. Kill. Kill. Kill.
We then get the Pickaxe of Hope. It appears Joseph had been trying to break down this wall. Next to it he wrote, "The Gate to Hell," and "Why can't I break this wall?" We then use the pickaxe on the wall of our actual apartment. Here we find that Walter did the ritual of Holy Assumption, the ritual which released him from the bonds of the flesh and allowed him to create his other worlds, right here in the apartment. In his hands we find the keys of liberation, which we use to finally leave our apartment. we find out that the whole time we've basically been in Walter's otherworld. At least that's how I choose to interpret it.
Eileen?
The apartments are filled with enemies, ghosts from previous areas, and of course, Walter himself. When we get to this area, we hear young Walter. In the center of the apartments, we find a sketch of his father. We then have various copies of Walter's father scattered throughout the apartments. Each one gives us a piece of dialogue related to the moment of Walter's birth.
Oh, shut the hell up! You can't blame it all on me. I told you we shouldn't have a baby, didn't I? Anyway, let's get out of here. I can't stand it anymore. Little crybaby. Hurry up. Get that.
Walter's father is dismissive, hostile. These lines not only show us that Walter's father rejected him, he also had a clear hand in his mother abandoning him. This ties directly and specifically to my Freudian reading of Walter's psyche. Within the Oedipus complex, the father is the figure who interrupts the child's over-attachment to the mother. In a healthy example of psychosexual development, that leads to the boy's identification with the father. They are able to make amends, so to say. But for Walter, the father remained, psychologically, a rival for the mother's affection, because to Walter's view, he of course took the mother away. That's where we get the hatred for men as a whole, like Richard Braintree, impulsive, aggressive men who stand in Walter's way of reaching his mother. At least if you accept my interpretation of the Gumheads. An interesting aspect of the father's design is of course the fact that we find him tied up, and so symbolically powerless. But this makes a lot more sense when you realize that the chains binding him are in fact holding the door to the superintendent's room, where we find Walter's umbilical cord. So even if tied up, symbolically impotent, a failed father, and totally out of Walter's life, psychologically he still holds the most powerful thing over Walter, his connection to his mother.
Eileen?
It's terrible. That poor little boy. His parents just threw him away right after he was born. Poor thing. He really thinks that room 302 is his mother. I've gotta help him.
It appears Eileen is to some extent starting to adopt the role of the nurturing mother for Walter. But anyway, we're finally able to head into the superintendent's room and grab the umbilical cord.
Henry? Are you okay? It's Walter. He's crying. Even finishing the 21 sacraments? It won't help that boy. I'm going back, Henry. To the room where he is. We're the only ones. The only ones that can stop him.
Back in the apartment, we head towards Walter's body and notice a hole under him. When we enter it, we are transported to a red circular room in the fetal position. This we could think of as a pseudo-womb created by Walter within the apartment which he believes to be his mother. We then have the final boss of the game, True Walter.
Hey there, little Walter. Just a little longer now.
Henry, you're it. The last of the 21 sacraments. The final sign. The receiver of wisdom.
The Walter we've been seeing is really more like a ghost, like the ones we've been running from throughout the game. This is the true Walter, in the process of being reborn within his mother's womb. He resembles the Wallman, or the One Truth, this figure breaking out of some sort of skin, in the process of being born. In this fight, we first have to stick the true Walter with these spears, the spears of the Holy Mother, that come out of these silhouettes representing Walter's victims. Only then can we begin to damage Walter's ghost. We must do this in a timely manner, as Eileen, almost hypnotized into a role of the Mother Reborn, slowly walks into this death machine. Now, this death machine is highly reminiscent of an Ophanim, one of the highest orders of angels in Christian angelology, holy beings whose wheels are said to be covered in eyes, symbols of divine omniscience, watchfulness, and the perfect, harmonious order of God. But here we essentially get a corrupted version of the Ophanim. The eyes are replaced with jagged spikes. It has no eyes at all. So we could say it represents blind violence. And to really hammer it home, it rests on a pool of blood. This God that is in the process of being born will not bring about a perfect order, but we could say a perfect chaos. Walter dies, and with him is Otherworlds and the desire to be with his mother, which had locked away the door to room 302. Henry is able to leave and go see someone at the hospital who, thanks to him, is alive and well.
Thanks. Guess I'll have to find a new place to live, huh?